So, my call to ministry really took place in 2014. And it was during that time that I'd undergone a bowel resection, had 18 inches of my large intestine removed, my appendix, and an abscess that had developed. And it's like a 6 or 7 hour surgery. Woke up to the being told, hey, you lost more blood than we hoped you would. It was like, great, love the confidence. And in that time, 2 months really transpired at Troy Beaumont Hospital, February to April of 2014. And during that time is really when God grabbed a hold of my heart, started pulling me in this direction of pastoral ministry. And I just remember like I fell in love with Jesus in just a really beautiful way. I could testify what Paul said. I found his power to be made perfect in weakness. In the lowest of valleys, I could say he was good. And that he grabbed a hold of my heart. And I remember thinking, okay, I am going to leave this hospital and I'm going to go into ministry and I am going after people that have suffered. And the naivety of a 20-year-old was I thought that was a niche group. Until you go out and you talk to people and you're like, wow, everyone suffers. And we're not surprised by that. The Bible, Solomon says in the end of Ecclesiastes, in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 1, he's like, hey, if you live long enough, you're going to bleed here. There's just this, Jesus says, hey, in this world you will have trouble. He doesn't say, hey, if you have trouble, or hey, you might have trouble, and God forbid trouble comes your way. No, he uses definitive language. He says, you will have, but take heart, I've overcome the world. There is a sense that all of us in here, whether you're 15, 16, 85, 90 years old, you have walked this road and you've experienced the pains that come from a Genesis 3 world. Right? You've experienced difficulty, hardship, things you said, hey, I wish this never would have came. I wish this wasn't a part of my story. If I could take white out, I would douse that chapter because I don't want to walk through that. I don't want to think about that. That was something. And so we think about suffering as something to avoid. And the reality is there's so many different kinds of suffering. Sometimes suffering that's just passive. There's nothing. You can't point your finger at anybody and say, that's the reason why suffering came my way. But maybe for some of you, you've had really tragic things happen to you. Something that was done to you. That there was an aggressor. You were the recipient, right? Where you could just say, hey, maybe it was a parent, it was a friend, it was a spouse, it was a family member. And I've been a pastor only 5 years, and I know that all of you have been dinged up. Like I can confidently say that. I don't get lost on social media if somebody's just presenting a highlight reel and their life's just awesome. I know that's not true. I know that's not every day. I know that there are days that are ugly. I know that there are days that are hard. I know that there are days that we wish never happened. And in all of that, underneath so much of the destruction and the chaos and the things that we have experienced come from a liar. The father of lies is what Jesus would call him. He's a deceiver. He seeks to steal, kill, and destroy. And I'm not saying everything that's ever happened to you, every bad day is just Satan saying, yep, you're my target today. But I am saying I know that he's behind chaos, and I know that he wants to ruin your life. I know that he wants to ruin your relationships. I know he wants to ruin your home. I know he wants to ruin your kids. I know he wants to ruin your marriage. Like that's his game plan. And there is an angst in me. I am not a violent person. I am not the first things I think how to solve a conflict by putting them up. No, that's not me. but man, I want to bash his teeth in. Anybody want to join me in that? I mean, when you get cued into what he's doing in the world, you see how he's destroying marriages. You see how he's pulling people into the domains of darkness. There is a real sense of just like, yeah, I want to get into the war. I want to get into the fight. There's a sense of justice that lives inside of us because we've been made in the image of God, and God is a God of justice. And so when we see the wickedness in the world, there ought to something stir in you. Right? A handful of years ago on Easter, I had posed the question to the congregation. If you were here, you'll remember about 80-90% of the guys raised their hands, and a few women even did. But I posed the question. I mean, if you got angry enough, who thinks they could take me in an old-fashioned bare-knuckle brawl? And what we found out that Easter was there was some fools, right? There were some people that just got deceived somewhere along the line. You know, they think I'm more sanctified than I am. Well, certainly he'll turn the other cheek. Not that sanctified yet. No, I joke. I would never beat you up. I love you too much. But in that, the point of my Easter sermon that year was I went through every chapter in the book of Matthew, the King Jesus Gospel. And Matthew, on repeat, over and over, is highlighting the power and the authority of Christ. And it climaxes and it finishes as he sends his disciples into the world. He says, all power and all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. And so go. And so we get to go. We get to push back darkness in the world by making disciples, doing the mission of God in the world, seeking justice, and knowing that there's a power and authority that accompanies us. Because guess what? There are real forces of evil in the world. There are real powers at play. And you could feel outmatched. You could say, well, hey, I'm just this baby Christian. I mean, I know John 3:16. I've committed that one to memory. But other than that, and so do I really feel equipped to go out and wage war against Satan and his demons? The power and the authority that's promised to us is far greater than he who's in the world. And when we see wrong and we see evil, there's something in us that moves towards, because we've been made in the image of God. And this is a beautiful reality, the fact that God is a God of justice. I mean, we've spent, this is now week 5, on 2 verses. And this is, we spent the first 4 weeks just on verse 6. And now we're covering half of verse 7. But we said, hey, this is a series on God the Father. This is God's declaration of himself. It isn't just saying, hey, this is what I do. He's saying, no, this is who I am. And he reveals that to us in this declaration. And we love the first part. He is compassionate and gracious. I'm in for that. Just free hugs all the time? Boom, sign me up for that. Slow to anger? Oh man, I've been around some people that got a quick fuse, and if somebody's gonna be slow to anger, like I like being around that kind of person. Abounding in steadfast love, man, this is getting so great. And then you get to verse 7. And I don't know how many of you, this is your life verse, but I'm guessing not many. It starts off even still beautiful. I mean, that flow of like, yeah, God, come on, preach it. Oh, you're warming my heart. He's forgiving to 1,000 generations. It's like, wow. I forgive iniquity, rebellion, and sin. And it's like, period. Just stop there, God. We're good. I love it. He says, but I do not excuse the guilty. I don't leave the guilty unpunished. And it's like, whoa. It's like a Quentin Tarantino movie. Right? It was seemingly one plot was over here, and this was the story we were all liking. But now, fast right turn. And he's saying, I'm not going to let the guilty go unpunished. It's like, whoa, hold up. You just said you were going to be forgiving to 1,000 generations, and now you're saying, I'm not letting the guilty go unpunished. I don't understand. I thought you were the God of endless hugs. I thought, where does justice fit into this equation? I mean, can't we just leave the justice of God in the Old Testament, just leave that back there like, hey, we understood you were serious about sin back then, but now we're getting into the new. And let's just forget about that last detail. Let's forget about that last no, but no. And so this creates a tension in us as we're trying to understand the person and of God the Father, the first head in the Trinity. And it's problematic. How can you be infinitely forgiving and perfectly just at the same time? It sounds like saying, hey, I'm on a diet, but I eat ice cream for breakfast. It's technically true. You are on a diet, but these don't seem to fit, right? That seems to be the tension that we're wrestling with here in verse 7. I wonder, as Moses hears this declaration, and he's okay, God, you're wanting me to get who you are down. I'm getting it down. And wait, hold up at that last part. Is that a contradiction? This is not a, we don't get to weed these out. These get to work in harmony. And throughout the story of Scripture, we see how this can be lived out. We see how, but in this moment, as you look at this declaration and you just follow along, the question becomes, hey, are you that grandfather just winks at me when I mess up? Or are you that cosmic judge who's ready to drop the gavel and be harsh and cruel to me? If we're honest, we want justice for everyone else's sin, right? For the wrong that everyone else has done. We're good with justice. And you can turn on the horrors of the news later, and there'll be something that inches up in you that tells you, no, justice is a good thing. Justice ought to be served. And yet the crazy double standard that we live within is that we don't want justice for ours, for our mishaps. That's why we love the parts of grace and mercy and steadfast love and abounding faithfulness. And we love all of that. And yet, when we think about justice, it's great when it's exercised out there. But if you come in here, you come to my heart, I don't want justice. I want grace and mercy. And so this is a double standard we rarely admit out loud. Right? We like to think, conceptually, like, I can be deserving of my own wrongs, but it's when our own wrongs become challenging. It's when our own wrongs, when I swore I wasn't going to do that again and just happened to do it again. And I just can't seem to get past that struggle, right? When I just repeat the words of Paul in Romans 7, why do I do the things that I don't want to do? I do the things that I hate. Right, we know that it's hard. We know that life is hard. We know that sin is difficult. We know that it's got a stranglehold on us at times, that we still have to fight against the flesh. And in that fight against the flesh is when we see, okay, no, we need grace. We need mercy. But how do we reconcile justice in all of this? And so when you ask God that question, when you got, hey, God, can you figure out this balance? Can you figure out this tension? Like, are you the good guy? Or are you the just guy? And you know what his answer is based on the text? Yes. Yes, that's what I am. I am steadfast, and I'm loving, and I'm faithful, and I'm good, and I'm also a God that's just. And so verses 6 and 7 of Exodus 34 is God's about me page. And he's letting us in. He's pulling back the curtain, and it deliberately ends with maintaining love to thousands, generations, forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin, and yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. God is proclaiming to Moses, this is who I am. People are going to have different ideas. People are going to cling to extremes. And we see that still playing out in our own world. Right? There are churches that say, hey, because of our desire to love, we're going to compromise on God's justice. But then you're going to have people that are, hey, we're going to hold so fastly to the just truth that we're going to compromise our ability to love. And so there's still a wrestle, there's still a tension that we live in. And God says, I'm both. Don't compromise. And so today, as we close our I Am series, this is a series on God the Father. This is something that we have been months in now for the Trinity. The Trinity, we explore how the Spirit forms our life. We explore how Jesus forms our life. And we are now experiencing how God the Father forms our life. And so it's through a clear understanding of who he is that we get to walk in a real freedom. Right, Jesus said that in John 8. He says, but by this you'll know the truth, and the truth will what? Set you free. I mean, we last year went through Job. What did Job need at the end of it? He needed a clearer understanding of who God was. God didn't connect every dot for him. He said, Job, this is who I am. And so it just so happened, we were finishing Job. We were heading to Kenya in January. And upon there in Kenya, it was just like, God, I'm seeing you in a greater way, bigger way, more beautiful way. And I just, man, I feel like I'm walking in a different kind of freedom. And I want to come home and I just want to preach, God, this is who God is. And so we have spent the better part of a year going through the Trinity as a church. Because I truly think if we could just see him more clearly, there's a freedom you get to walk in that the enemy can't take from you. Because he holds more power and authority. And so here's our big idea for today. It is the cross is where God's mercy and justice meet in perfect harmony. And so we'll feel the tension of these two pieces here, even the discomfort. And then we get to see how Jesus resolves this dilemma that we often find ourselves in as we try to understand the character and nature of God. So first, let's zoom in on the comforting piece of our text, because you're probably like, man, you are really feeling something today, making us all feel bad. It's like, how was church today? And it's like, don't want to talk about it. Feeling sorrowful. Tyler dug up a lot of my past and suffering, and then he didn't go anywhere with it. But let's look at verse 7, because this is beautiful. This is how it begins. Forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. This is a reason to have your life verse be Exodus 34:7. Because of the exact words that get used. Like if you underline in your Bible, you highlight, you circle wickedness, rebellion, and sin, because these are, this covers everything. In the Hebrew, these three words have different shades of meaning, but a comprehensive painting is getting pictured here. So let's look at the word iniquity. The Hebrew word is avan. It is moral crookedness or perversity. It's that warped up stuff in us that we're just not proud of, right? It's that thing about us that we just know. It's like, man, this is a habit. This is something about me that I regularly fall into. And to deny this would be almost to deny myself. And then you have the transgression. It's the Hebrew word pasha, and it means a rebellious, willful violation. Like when we knowingly step past God's boundaries and we just don't care. As a kid, I was in a bowling league. You've probably heard me tell bowling stories before. But I remember being so mad one time at my bowling league as a kid. Had a bad roll that I just walked past the line, on purpose so the buzzer would go. It was just, I knew what I was doing. I was angry and I didn't care. That's a transgression. And then he covers sin. And it's the Hebrew word chataha, and it literally means missing the mark. Our failures and shortcomings, even unintentional mistakes. Because I think the thing that we often miss about sin is that we think sin has to be willful. We think that we have to be knowledgeable about sin. It's like, no, God sets the standard for sin. And you may have somebody in the third world country, never heard of Jesus, never heard of the gospel. They say, well, can they really sin if they don't know it? It's like, yeah, they can. They absolutely can. It's why the gospel, Great Commission, is so necessary. How beautiful, Paul writes this in Romans, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. Right? We have to get to the ends of the earth, right? Because why? There's people that are sinning and are far from Christ and that will spend eternity apart from him, apart from reaching them with the good news of the gospel. I mean, I know I'm getting off track here, but I'm trying to show you a point with sin. It can be unintentional, but it's God's bar, it's God's standard, and to fall short of that, that's what Moses is writing about here. And so he's essentially saying, by using the word iniquity, transgression, and sin, he's saying, any way a human can mess up, God is saying, I can forgive that. Isn't that a reason to make this a life verse? Because it's like, hey, I'm sure I sinned on the car ride here. Didn't think about it, didn't know about it, but hey, maybe I did. And God is saying, hey, no matter how great, no matter how deliberate, no matter how small, he's saying, I can forgive it all. That's good news. No sin is too twisted. No crime is too deliberate. God can forgive it all. And if you've been tracking in this series, if you've been with us throughout it all, you've heard God's compassionate and gracious, and he's patient, and he's got loyal love. Now add this. God's default position towards sinners is mercy and forgiveness. Like God delights in forgiving. The Micah 7:18 says that God delights to show mercy. Imagine that, the creator of the heavens and the earth, the one who formed the Milky Way, not the candy bar, like the actual Milky Way, who's above and transcendent of every other power and authority in the world, the highest of courts that you could ever be charged in, loves to forgive. I don't know about you, if you've ever been pulled over by a police officer. Anybody? I mean, what happens, right? You see the red and blue behind you, and immediately you get weak knees, palms sweaty, mom's spaghetti, and in it, your heart just sinks into your stomach, doesn't it? Like, for whatever reason, you think no matter they're going to come, they're going to pull me out, and somehow I'm going to end up on the electric chair, right? You're probably like, no, you're just crazy, Tyler. We don't think that way. But no, there's a sense that when you get pulled over by a police officer, it's kind of scary. Even if it was like, you were probably speeding, or you passed through a light that was blushing. Because it wasn't red. Certainly you didn't run a red. It was yellow turning red. But you get pulled over and that officer comes to your door. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but the officer talks to you for a second, license, registration, whatever. And, hey, do you know why I pulled you over? And you come up with either trying to work up some tears or a smile. I mean, you're giving them some emotion to work off of. And you're just hoping they're going to let you off. And they say, hey, okay, I see, you don't have any problem with your driving record. Hey, just go drive safer, have a good day. What kind of relief do you feel driving away from that stop? I mean, you feel like I'm walking free. I'm golden. Like, day has been made because I didn't get a ticket. I don't have to go to court, or whatever it was that you were fearful of. And in that, you think about God being forgiving and being able to say, no, you can go free. And it's not because of a minor traffic stop, but because of the deepest, darkest things, sin in your life that you've ever done, ever do, will do, whatever. And God can look at your record of debt and say, you can go free. I mean, that's a beautiful feature of who God is. Like, he loves doing that. He loves sending the people to go free. I mean, you think about the Bible is just one long story of different people with bad rap sheets that get to walk free, that get to experience the forgiveness of God. I think about David, probably none greater of a sinner than David, right? Adulterer, murderer. And he gets to write this in Psalm 103, verse 3. He forgives all your sins. I mean, take that wickedness, rebellion, and sin and say, it's covered, forgiven. Whatever you've done, I can forgive it. Like one commentator notes that these terms really cover the full spectrum of human wrongdoing. This is incredibly reassuring. There's not little pieces of our rebellion, little pieces of our sinful nature, little pieces that have snuck past him. You know, he's saying all of the minor things, the major things, the neutral things, he's like, I can cover it all. The little ones aren't going to slip by me, and the big ones aren't going to overwhelm me. But here comes the twist. Because yes, Lord. But here comes the twist in the next verse that we can't ignore. It introduces us to this tension. Right after this proclaiming of abundant forgiveness, he says, he will by no means clear the guilty. The guilty don't go unpunished. Is this a contradiction? Not at all. It's revelation. It's a revelation of God is just absolutely committed to righting wrongs and holding evil accountable. His mercy doesn't cancel out his justice, and his justice doesn't cancel out his mercy. He is both 100% all the time. God's commitment to love and truth isn't 50-50. It isn't, hey, I'm truthful on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you better, No, he holds both in perfect tension. And honestly, we crave this justice. We really do. We really do. We live in a world where terrible injustices happen. And if God just winked at every injustice with no consequence, could we truly call him good? Could we? I don't believe so. Theologian Miroslav Volf argues a God who isn't angry at injustice and doesn't one day end evil is not worthy of worship. Like deep down, we know this. It's why we cheer when the villain finally gets destroyed in the movie. Right? When we see the Joker go down. It's why we feel sick when heinous, unpunished crimes, crimes go unpunished. I understand that this is probably socially, politically hot in today's climate and world. But you think about everything that's happening in the news with the Epstein stuff. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think there's a lot of us that would say, man, we want to see the guilty receive punishment. We want to see justice served. We don't want to see things get covered up. And when the world feels like something's getting covered up, it's like, that's wrong. That's not justice. Right? We know that we can't wink. We know that we can't cover up. We know that we can't hide because it's not who we were made to reflect. We've been made in the image of God, a God who is just. We want to see the wrongs of our world made right. And so God's justice is actually an expression of his goodness. If all we had was verse 6 and half of verse 7, and we don't see a God of justice, all of those other definitions would be shallow. All of them would lose some sense of weight. And it's these these attributes working together that shows the glory and the beauty of who God is. One commentator wrote, God's wrath is not a cranky explosion, but his settled opposition to the cancer, which is eating out the insides of the human race that he loves with his whole being. In other words, God's anger at sin comes from his love for us. It's like that crafty serpent that we talked about at the beginning. When he shows up in the garden, and he shows up to Adam and Eve, and he deceives them so that sin enters the world. God hates that. God has an anger towards that. And for those of us, again, that have walked this world, have experienced the pains of the Genesis 3 world, we hate it too. We hate the ugly reality of sin. And it enrages us. If he felt nothing when the pains of this world harm us, would he really love us? No, he's angered at the reality of the beloved being hurt. If he didn't, it would mean he didn't care, because the opposite of love isn't anger, it's apathy. To then say, no, anger still shows a volume of care, doesn't it? But to ignore existence, to be apathetic, is one of the greatest evils we could show to another person. Think of a parent who finds out their child's being destroyed by a harmful addiction. That parent will be rightfully angry, not because they hate their child, but because they love that child so fiercely. When they see something harming their child, it's like, claws come out, ready to fight, because I hate what's happening to my child. In a similar way, God's justice is his fierce love in action. You're going to try and hurt one of my children? No way. So you see the justice, you see the anger, and it's as if God's saying, I won't let evil win. And this is good news. This is good news until we realize evil runs through every human heart, including mine. And so at this point, again, this stuff is just really heavy. I like the forgiveness part better. I get it. But we need to face this uncomfortable truth. We have to. Because if God doesn't deal with guilt, where would that leave us? We all have guilt. I can't even keep my own standards perfectly. I mean, sometimes we think, God's just so rigid, or he's got so many rules. And I was listening to Timothy Keller one day talk about this, and he was sharing how, you take that person that says, hey, God's standard's too rigid, or it's too hard, or it's too bad, and compare your standard for how you hold everybody else. And at the end of your life, would you be able to say, I lived up to my own standard? And it's like, I think we'd all, if we were honest, say no. Romans 3:23 reminds us, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And so if God is truly just, he can't just ignore your sins and mine. He can't. Imagine a human judge, imagine this court that was just known for, everybody that comes in, though guilty, though the serious crime, the judge just gets to send them away free. Well, certainly we wouldn't want our perpetrator getting sent there. We'd say, no, there's no justice there. How could we? It's so misguided. It's a threat of justice. And so how much more can the judge of all the earth just allow things to go unpunished? And so we seem to have an insoluble dilemma, God's love on one side and his justice on the other. And if God were merciful at the expense of his justice, then evil would run rampant forever, not exactly loving. And yet if God were only just with no mercy, none of us could stand. None of us could stand a chance, not necessarily hopeful either. And so a world with no justice is hell. And a world where there is no mercy is also hell. And God, in his goodness, refuses to give us either. Instead, he has a surprising plan, one that was hinted throughout the old and fulfilled in the new, and it satisfies both sides of his character. Right, the grand narrative of Scripture is driving to a climactic solution, the cross of Jesus Christ. At the cross, God found a way to satisfy justice without compromising mercy, a way to punish sin without destroying sinners, to forgive the guilty without clearing the guilty. It is the most profound plot twist in history. On Good Friday, mercy and justice met, not in a cosmic train crash. It wasn't like, two things were coming to collide and it was going to be a big explosion. No, in a perfect harmony, these two meet. They meet. Jesus, the Son of God, willingly took on himself the justice we deserved. All the judgment and righteous wrath against sin that should have fallen on us fell on him instead. And even as he was crucified, even as he's there hanging on a cross, he utters the words, Father, forgive them. Father, forgive them. He prayed for his executioners because they don't know what they're doing. Mercy in the very moment that justice was being carried out. As the prophet Isaiah foretold, he says that the punishment that brought us peace was on him. I'm going to read that one more time. Isaiah 53, verse 5. The punishment that brought us peace was put on him. Why? So that we, the guilty, could be pardoned. At the cross, God didn't set aside his justice. He fulfilled it. He fulfilled his justice on the cross, on himself, out of mercy. The New Testament declares this triumph clearly. Romans 3, verse 26 explains that God presented Jesus as a sacrifice for our sins to demonstrate his righteousness so as to be just and the one who justifies those who have faith in Jesus. You see what happened? He didn't remove his ability to be just. He says he did this. He laid Christ on that cross so that he could be just and justifier. That's the plan. That's the beauty of the cross. Is that God did not compromise. He didn't say, hey, I just don't care about wrongdoing and evil and sin. No, he says, no, I'm just and I care, but I want to bring these people into my family. And so the only way that I can be just and justifier is that I have to lay the punishment on Jesus for you and for me. That's good news. That's good news. Only God could conceive such a resolution. Theologians often say that the cross is where justice and mercy meet. And Psalm 85:10 foresaw it. Mercy and truth have met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed. Tim Keller summarizes the gospel like this. The Christian gospel is that I am so flawed that Jesus had to die for me, yet I am so loved and valued that Jesus was glad to die for me. Justice meant Jesus had to die for us. Mercy meant he was glad to do so because of the great love that he has for us. What an amazing convergence at the cross. Justice and mercy meet in harmony. At the cross, no part of Christ's character was compromised. No, it was an expression of how you can be steadfast in your love and unwilling to allow the guilty to go unpunished. This ought to fill us sinners who've been lavished in this grace, with awe and gratitude. Moses first heard these words from God about his mercy and his justice on Mount Sinai, but it was on the Mount of Calvary that God ultimately proved them to be true. If you're here today and you say, hey, I've never put my faith, hope in Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of sin. You know, look at this verse. There's no part of your life, no piece of your brokenness, no part of your story that's unredeemable. There's literally never, there's not a part of your bill that he's looking at and saying, nope, I can't get that one. No. This steadfast love, his willingness to forgive. Like, you don't have the story of all stories that trumps God's ability to forgive. Like, your ability to forgive, or your ability to sin, is not greater than God's ability to forgive. He's unmatched. There's not an authority or a power in the world that's a match for him. And in this, he invites us because of this great love that he has. He invites us. He wants relationship with us. He wants a people, a family, now and forever. And so if you never have today, I want to invite you into this relationship. Jesus purchased it. Jesus comes to the cross, dies, gets put in the tomb, and is raised to life, and he ascends to heaven, and he's sitting at the right hand of the Father, and he's coming back one day. And to be able to be a part of the people, that you're sitting there in your car, and your heart fell into your stomach, and you're wondering, what's going to happen to me? And to be able to have Jesus stand there, well done, my good and faithful servant. Come enjoy the rest of your master. To be able to experience those words, you get to go free. It only happens because of Jesus. Not because we were moral, not because of the family that we were raised in, not because of who our grandma was, but because Christ, the embodiment of love and truth, came in our place, and he absorbed our sin so that God could remain just and justifier. You can be justified today. You can be fully, freely, forever forgiven today because of Jesus, and only because of Jesus. And the word tells us that if we were to confess with our mouths and believe in our hearts that God raised Jesus from the dead, we could have this relationship. We get to the relationship of being a part of a new family, a family of freedom. I just invite you to that. If you never have, that would be the best decision you could ever make.